Smith. Mr Mercer, good to see you again. What do you make of these reports that Tobias Ellwood is concerned about potential cuts to the British Army? I mean, reducing numbers down to 70,000. What's your view on that?
Well, I think Tobias is a principled man, and he obviously has a visibility as to what's going on that a lot of us don't have. But look, I make no bones about it. It's been going on for a couple of weeks now. I've got a sort of resilient cohort of Conservative MPs who are not prepared to see the degradation of this nation's military further. I think it is the first duty of government. We know we're in difficult times, but we can't just talk about that. We have to fund it properly. We have to resource it properly. You know, the whole what do we want from the military? I think, you know, you can't ask them for stuff and then not give them the money to do it. I think it's been going on for a while. There was clearly some fat in the system, but I think we've hit a sort of a resilient boulder, and it's our job as politicians to stand up for that. And stand up for what we believe in.
It was the case for quite a time that the Conservatives were seen nominally as the party of defence, but since 2010, the amount of materiel, the amount of man and woman power that we've lost from our armed forces, I mean, this was the point at which many people suspected we might see a bit more money coming from the Treasury.
Yeah, well, I don't think we were ever going to see anything last week. I think that was just fundamentally wrong, because we're in a national security review at the moment, and that's going to report. It's been delayed until February next year, and I think that's when the sort of crunch point will come, and we need to, as a nation, really think about what we want from our armed forces. That relationship that I think is so important. You know, it hasn't been right for some time. That's one of the reasons I got into politics, but I can clearly see now that what is proposed is going too far, and I'm determined to do everything I can as a sort of lowly backbencher, but certainly with a very powerful cohort behind me, to make sure that we remain the party of defence, that we do our duty by those who serve as we expect for them. And I would say that colleagues are absolutely with me on this one. And, you know, it's not about me, Tobias, or anyone else. It's about this country's relationship with its military, you know, whether we actually follow through on some of the things we say about them. And I'm afraid on this occasion, I'm determined to sort of change course, make the government change course, and see this one through.
Well, indeed. I mean, on that point, I think you served, was it three tours in Afghanistan yourself, Mr Mercer? Yeah. We no longer, of course, have boots on the ground there, but could we, with 70,000 within the army, could we have conducted that campaign as well as our commitments elsewhere?
Well, we've always had a problem with commitment over the last 15, 20 years. You know, whether or not we could conduct two middle-level operations like Iraq and Afghanistan, I think people who know more than me have said quite clearly we can't. But, you know, this issue around commitment to our forces, it's been one of the driving things for me trying to get into this rather murky world of politics, because the gap between what we say and what consecutive prime ministers have said about defence, and the reality and what it feels like to serve and what we ask our people to do, particularly on operations, I'm afraid is getting too wide. And a serious breakdown of that bond and that relationship would not be good for the country. And above everything in all this, I'm afraid, I think I speak for all of us that we are patriots in the House of Commons, and we want to see this country prosper and do well and clearly look after itself. We're not going to get into a position, I'm afraid, while I'm there, of becoming sort of complacent about the hard-won freedoms of the generations before us. It's a very painful lesson to learn, and I'll do everything I can to make sure we don't have to relearn that and invest properly in defence.
Indeed, and this is before we even move on to, and we don't unfortunately have time, the discussion of whether or not the military covenant is being fulfilled these days. One interesting thing that you and some colleagues have proposed, though, is removing Trident from the defence budget. Yeah. Explain that a little bit, please.
Well, you know, I think clearly we know the challenges, but we've got to try and provide solutions to this. You know, I know the Prime Minister and the Chancellor and the Defence Secretary get these challenges as well, but we've got to provide solutions. I think the first thing we need to look at is getting the continuous at-sea deterrent out of the MOD budget. I mean, you've got a project there that, through variations outside of control of the MOD, can go up by £300, £500 million a year. That is simply not compatible at the same time with asking regiments to, you know, cut welfare budgets by £500 to £1,000 or removing rental cars. You know, those two things. You can't have an open-ended budget at one end for equipment that will have no cap on it, essentially, and then make your men and women ever more tighten their belts. If you really do believe that your people are your finest asset, then you need to change track. And this would be a good start. It's all a campaign. There is no silver bullet here. But I believe actually the sands of time are shifting. I can feel the momentum changing, and I'm hopeful that we will get to a place where defence, is rightly prioritised as the #1 priority of this government.
We will no doubt again speak on this issue in future, but for now, Mr. Mercer, many thanks.